The Terminator Rampage was developed and published by Bethesda Softworks. It was released in the year 1993 for PC-DOS. Two versions were released of this game. The first one was a floppy disk version, and later on Bethesda released a CD-ROM version, and this is the CD-ROM version. Both versions are for the most part identical. The only differences that I know of are that in the CD-ROM version the intro is slightly longer because of some additional animated scenes. Then Bethesda dropped the password function in this version, and you start with a lot more ammunition in the CD-ROM version, which makes it also a little bit easier than the floppy disk version. Yeah, it is a first-person shooter, but it is not based on any of the Terminator movies. It is also the third out of 5 Terminator games which were made by Bethesda Softworks for PC-DOS. First they made the Terminator, then the Terminator 2029, the Terminator Rampage, the Terminator Future Shock, and the Terminator Skynet. The Terminator Rampage actually continues the storyline of the Terminator 2029. After the player destroyed the Skynet orbital platform / Central Command, he returned to the Resistance headquarters in Los Angeles, where John Connor and a few Resistance scientists started some tests with a time distortion device which was recovered from one of Skynet's underground testing labs in the Gamma sector. They were experimenting with so-called null time fields, which might be helpful after the war was over, and since the scientists didn't fully understand this device yet, they've decided to try something harmless like those fields, where basically time stands still, if I understand it correctly. While John Connor supervised technicians, scientists and other personnel who conducted tests inside one of those null time fields, events unfolded on the outside which could only be described as catastrophically. Resistance personnel disappeared into thin air, destroyed Skynet bases reappeared, scanners showed a lot of enemy activities in their sector which was totally clear just a minute ago, and the machine's communication system went back online, which could only mean one thing. The Skynet orbital platform was existing again, but how was that possible? After a short time of panic and disbelief, people started to pull themselves together and began to search for an answer. The awful truth was found deep in the memory core of the shuttle's flight recorder from the final mission. Shortly before the orbital platform blew up, Skynet had performed a core dump with all vital data pertaining to its efforts to eradicate organic life. All the informations were placed inside a specially modified T-800 infiltration unit, a so-called metanode. This metanode, along with a time distortion device, were placed inside an escape pod and ejected seconds before the bomb went off. Its mission was to travel back in time to the year 1984 and infiltrate a high-security laboratory of Cyberdyne Systems in the Cheyenne Mountains in North America and upload all the data into the central computer, so that the self-awareness of Skynet would happen years earlier than initially, and with all the knowledge of the future, Skynet would not make the same mistakes again. This time there would be no Sarah Connor, no John Connor, and no Resistance. If it weren't for those null time fields, all the rest of the Resistance would have been wiped from existence. But they were still alive and they had a chance to change the past and its future back to the way it was. Therefore, someone would have to go back to 1984 and stop the metanode before it was able to complete its mission. The technicians knew enough of the time distortion device to work it properly, and one of the few soldiers left volunteered for this job. But destroying a T-800, or actually a Metanode, with weapons from 1984 is almost impossible. Therefore, technicians implanted a mini-chip into the soldier with schematics to create a crude phased plasma rifle. Based on available records from that time, he should be able to find all the needed parts in the facility. And there is something else in this facility which might be also very helpful. The original prototype of the Ace battle armor, which was stored at that time in a vault at the edge of the complex. Sadly, none of the suit's systems will be functional, since the necessary technology would not be available for another 15 years. But it wouldn't be useless, since the armor could still protect the soldier from enemy fire. Now that they had the time and the location, there was one small problem left: the fact that the time distortion device wasn't accurate enough. Time and location could be set on this machine, but the more detailed those settings were, the more deviations you would get on the other setting, time or location. And since they had the exact coordinates of the vault with the Ace battle armor, which would also be a secure place for the soldier to start his mission, the technicians increased all the available parameters and stabilizers to the exact coordinates, which would increase the deviations on the time setting to a maximum of about 10% in a worst case scenario. But how high could those chances be? In the case of our hero, pretty high. You arrived on the exact coordinates, but as it turns out 4 years later than planned. Thanks to the intro and also the introduction in the manual, we come to know that also the Metanode experienced some problems on its journey from the future. The Metanode crash landed in the Gobi Desert, and since it traveled mostly in darkness and secrecy to not attract any attention, it took the Metanode years to arrive at the Cyberdyne laboratories. But it still had enough time left to take over the entire complex, converting the laboratory into an armaments factory and manufacturing an entire army of deadly machines which are guarding the facility, and as it looks like, eliminated all human personnel. So our hero didn't arrive too late for the party, but will he be able to stop the Metanode in time to save the future of humanity? Well, that is up to the player. Your task is to fight your way through the entire Cyberdyne Systems laboratory, which has a total of 32 floors/levels, full of the Metanode's metal henchmen. Find all the 14 parts needed to build the VTech phased plasma rifle, so that you will have enough firepower for the final showdown with the Metanode. At the beginning of the game you have to name your character, select one of the 3 difficulty levels, easy, normal or hard, and start the game. Now this might sound silly, but when you play this game, make sure that you don't forget the name of your character, since all the save states will be tied to this character, and if you forget the name you can't load them anymore. So just to be on the safe side, you may wanna write down the name somewhere, or you're gonna use a name/call sign that you use all the time in other games. But should it actually happen that you forget the name of your character, you can still find it in the save file on the hard disk if you open it with the editor in Windows Explorer, for instance. On the screen we have a couple of different indicators. On the top left are the name of the current level, then your score, and below that you can see your ammunition status divided in 5 different ammunition types: bullets, shotgun shells, scatter grenades, concussion grenades, and high explosive grenades. On the bottom left are 2 energy bars. The green one stands for your health and the blue one for your armor. On the bottom right we have a minimap, and below that you can see which weapon you are currently using. The minimap shows you, of course, a small section of the current area, plus your location and the exact coordinates. A red dot stands for the exit to the next level, and a green dot stands for the exit to a previous level. Sadly, those are all the things that the minimap can show you. And every time you aim your weapon at an enemy, a target identification will be displayed instead of the minimap. It shows you an image and the class of the enemy, plus the target's life energy. Your main goals in the levels are find the parts for the plasma rifle and find the exit to the next level. Like already mentioned, you need 14 parts to build the plasma rifle, which are scattered throughout level 2 to 15. The game gives you a small hint, since every time you enter a level, a message will appear shortly, telling you if there is one or more or actually no parts at all to find in this level. By pressing the letter V on the keyboard, you bring up the build plan, where you see all the parts that you have already collected so far and which parts are still missing. Beside those parts, you're also gonna find some other useful items like medpacks, medkits and so-called stim sticks, which heal your character. Repair packs, repair kits and quick fixes repair your armor. Then you're also gonna find ammunition and weapons, of course, and in many levels you also have to find an access card in order to progress to the next level. There are 8 different kinds of weapons available in the Terminator Rampage. A Beretta 9mm, an Uzi, an M16, an AK-47, a Spaz 12 shotgun, a mini cannon, a grenade launcher, and finally the plasma rifle. At the beginning you only have the Beretta, but from level 2 on you also start to find other weapons, which is also necessary, since with the Beretta you are only able to defend yourself against smaller enemies. For stronger enemies like the T-800 you need something with a little more firepower / punch, like the M16 or the shotgun. Speaking of enemies, in the Terminator Rampage you will encounter 6 different kinds of enemies. There are the skimmers, which are flying drones, pretty weak and light armed. Then there are the seekers, which we already know from the Terminator 2029. Flying mines, which patrol for organic life and explode on impact. Weakly armed, but don't underestimate their destruction power. Then there are the 2 versions of the T-800, the Infiltration unit and the Combat unit. The Infiltration unit looks and acts like a human being and is armed with a pistol. The Combat unit looks like in the movies with their full metal chassis and is armed with a shotgun. Both are tough enemies, but the Infiltration unit is slightly weaker in terms of armor and firepower. Next there are the Metaborgs, big combat robots armed with a minigun. Those guys are pretty tough and they make a lot of damage. And finally there are the Metaguards. Mechs which look like Ed-209 from Robocop, and they are even stronger and redoubtable than the Metaborgs in every way. Thankfully all the enemies were made with 20th century technology and materials, since otherwise your weapons would be more or less useless. One lesson that you're gonna learn very fast in this game is that if you have shot down an enemy, make sure it is actually destroyed, because otherwise it will stand up after a short time and attack you again, mostly from behind. The first 2 times it happens, it is actually a surprise if you don't know it. So sorry if I spoiled here a little secret, but I just wanted to mention it since it reminds me of the scene in the nightclub from the first Terminator movie, where the Terminator gets shot down by Kyle Reese and seconds later he stands up again, just to show the audience how tough those machines actually are. But again, the enemies in this game, except for the Meta node, are not as tough as the Terminators from the 21st century. A rule of thumb: as long as the target identification is still visible, the enemy is not destroyed. After you found the last of the 14 parts, the phased plasma rifle is ready for some action. And what's really handy about this weapon is the fact that you don't need to find ammunition for it, since this weapon recharges itself. While using the phased plasma rifle, 2 additional indicators will be displayed on the screen. On the bottom left, the energy bar of the rifle, and on the top left, below the ammunition types, you can see the output of the weapon. It can be set to 4 different strengths: 50, 100, 150 and 200 watts. And depending on the strength, each shot uses more or less energy, and therefore you can shoot with an output of 50 watts a lot more often without reloading or recharging than with an output of 200 watts. Backtracking to a previous level is possible and necessary, since no other weapon than the phased plasma rifle can harm the Meta node, and you need to find all the parts. That's the reason why this feature is in this game. but it also brings a not to underestimate advantage for the player, since enemies don't respawn, but ammunition, health and repair items do, even access cards, and you can use them also in the later levels, since those cards are not restricted to specific floors. So to open a locked exit, you just need an access card. Which one doesn't matter. You can save the game at any time, and you can play the game either with joystick and keyboard, mouse and keyboard, or keyboard only. Playing a first person shooter with a joystick felt a little bit awkward, but you can get used to it. Then playing with mouse and keyboard felt also a little bit weird at first, since this is an old first person shooter where you can't aim up and down, instead you move forwards or backwards. But I was surprised how fast I got used to it. But keyboard only was still my choice of control type to play this old school first person shooter. The only thing noticeable while playing with the setting was that you fire your weapon with the enter key instead of the control key, but in the end all three control types work. For some people it might be hard to believe, but for 1993 the game has good detailed graphics. The sound effects are pretty good, and it's also the same thing with the music. Even though Bethesda cheated a little bit and used some music tracks from their previous game, the Terminator 2029, for the Terminator Rampage, but actually I don't mind that, since I also like the soundtrack of the Terminator 2029 very much, and it fits also the game and adds to the atmosphere. The game has also an interesting feature in terms of music, because it reacts to the game. While walking through a level, the game plays the music track of this level, but as soon as you encounter an enemy, it will switch to fighting music. And as soon as you destroy all the enemies that were after you and the fighting music track is over, the normal music track continues, until you encounter the next enemy or exit the level. This feature works actually pretty well, but in some situations it's a little bit behind, since if you walk around a corner and the seeker blows up right in your face, the music will start playing afterwards, because the situation happened too fast. Another thing is that since there are many enemies in the levels, you will hear the fighting music a lot, and even though I like it and it fits very well the action/atmosphere, I would also like to hear the music tracks of the levels a little bit more, since I like them as well. But overall it's okay, and I wouldn't say it's annoying or anything. Now let's talk about the weaknesses/drawbacks of the game. First, the graphics engine. I don't know which engine Bethesda actually used for Terminator Rampage, but it is not able to run this game smoothly. No matter how powerful the computer, the engine itself seems to have problem displaying all the graphics. So framerate issues are normal in this game, and it changes from level to level. In the setup menu you have a couple of options to increase the performance / to stabilize the frame rate. You can turn on or off the floor and or ceiling textures, and you can also increase or decrease the graphic detail level. I personally would only recommend to decrease the graphic detail level, since the game doesn't look right and loses a lot of atmosphere if you turn off floors or ceilings, or even both. By decreasing the graphic detail level, the details themselves don't change much at all. Instead, the draw distance will be reduced. So with this method you keep the looks of the game, and you also get a constant and playful frame rate. But there's also a downside with this method, since you might not see or notice enemies which are further away. This can result in some extra hits which seem to come out of nowhere. The next thing is that while playing the game, you get the impression that the game is unfinished and that it was rushed to hit the release date. Now I don't know if this is actually the case, but I'm gonna try to explain why I think it is. It starts with the fact that if you don't read the manual, chances are high that you're never gonna beat the game, since the game never tells you that you have to find all the parts to build this phased plasma rifle, which is the only weapon to defeat the end boss, and actually without this weapon you will not make it to this end boss either. Which brings me to my next point: not enough ammunition for too many enemies, and the game is too big for its own good, or you could also say for the stamina of a normal gamer. So let's talk about the first point. In the floppy disk version of the Terminator Rampage, you only start with 100 bullets, and if I'm not mistaken, with 50 bullets if you play it on hard mode. In the CD-ROM version you start with over 600 bullets, and you also get some shotgun shells and a couple of grenades of each type. So Bethesda noticed after releasing the floppy disk version that there is a shortage in terms of ammunition in the game, that they try to fix by giving you more ammunition right from the start. And yes, it helps a lot, especially in the earlier levels, but it doesn't fix the problem. Because even though each level is huge and there is a lot to explore, you won't find much ammunition or healing items at all. Most of the times there are 2 rooms per level where you will find a small stash of items. But beside those you will not find much more. You get some ammunition from destroyed enemies, but this doesn't happen all the time, it actually increases with your progress. So in the first levels it rarely happens, then later on you could say almost every second time, and I guess by level 16 or so it happens almost all the time. By the way, Seekers are the only enemies which never drop ammunition. But overall enemies drop less ammunition than you need to destroy them. Just an example, if you destroy a Metaborg, it drops 1 concussion grenade, but you need at least 4 of those to destroy one of them. So in the end the numbers will never match up, and there are more enemies in the game than ammunition. That's why the backtracking is very helpful, since like I mentioned earlier, all the items respawn but not the enemies. And if you are low on ammo, health or armor, you can always go back and refill your supplies. Now I know it sounds like cheating, but honestly it is necessary to survive in this game. But as soon as you found all the parts and completed the phased plasma rifle, the ammunition problems are gone, because it only needs to recharge. And with a setting of 200 watts, it is also the most powerful weapon in this game. And you know what's funny? At that point the game loses a little bit of its touch. The weapon doesn't make you unstoppable or anything, but now you don't need to find ammunition at all. And I know it sounds like I can't be satisfied, because first I was complaining about that, yeah, there's not enough ammunition, and now that I don't have to worry about it anymore, I complain again. I get it. But up to this point the search for ammunition was an important element in this game, and now it's not necessary anymore. You still might use some other weapons too, like the mini cannon or the grenade launcher, but those weapons are available after level 15, and you're gonna use them more for fun or to see how well they perform. But in the end you will stick with the phased plasma rifle as your main weapon. Now to the next problem: the game is too big for its own good. I've already mentioned it, but let's recap. The levels are huge, tons of enemies, weapons, ammunition, repair and healing items are rare, plus every now and then you have to find an access card and 1 or 2 parts for the plasma gun. That actually doesn't sound too bad at all, more like the ingredients for, typical first person shooter. Well, yes, but you have to do this 32 times, since the game has 32 levels, and without any help from the game. At least there's the minimap, which is very helpful in terms of orientation and the fact that it highlights the exits. But still you have to search every room to find all the stuff you need to progress in this game, which in the long run becomes monotone and boring. I guess also Bethesda noticed this flaw, and this is the reason why they included a hint.txt file with the game, where you can find the coordinates of all important items for the first 24 levels. Again, some might call it cheating, but even with the coordinates, the game is everything else than a walk in the park, and it still took me over 15 hours to complete the game. The main difference is that with the coordinates you know where to go and what to do. This increases the speed of the game and also your progress, which results in a more enjoyable experience / the game is more fun. Even though the size of the levels is a big drawback in this game, the levels are actually well made for a game from 1993. Surely there are a few exceptions, but the levels are recognizable for what they are. Offices, labs, personal quarters, cafeteria, warehouses, and so on and so on. The only things left that I wanted to mention are no drawbacks or anything, they are actually more my personal beef with this game. The first one is that from the movies we know that only organic life can be sent through time, but in this game an entire escape pod with everything in it was sent back to the past. A goof or a change of rules which Bethesda Softworks also used in the Terminator Future Shock. But yeah, this is a different story that I'm gonna tell you another time. The other thing is that the meta node is an invention from Bethesda Softworks, and beside the Terminator Rampage they also used it as the main villain in the add-on Operation Scour for the Terminator 2029, which was made at the same time as the Terminator Rampage and also released in the same year, but both meta nodes are completely different, which means that each programming team only got the name meta node, and the rest of this new enemy type was up to them. Spoiler alert for everyone who doesn't want to see how the end boss looks like, just skip to the time that I'm gonna display right now to continue this review spoiler free. In Operation Scour, the meta node is described as a right hand of Skynet, also a supercomputer, but more like a Skynet Junior with the ability to move around, and yeah, it's not stationary like Skynet itself. In the Terminator Rampage, it is described as a modified T-800 infiltration unit, but it doesn't look anything like it at all. Yes, it could be that because of the impact the meta node was badly damaged and it had to repair / modify itself, but it's a bit overkill and there's no resemblance whatsoever with a T-800 anymore. In the end, I would rate the Terminator Rampage somewhere between below average and average at best. I guess this is actually fair for this game. I know a lot of people, or at least some people, would rate this game even lower, but in my opinion the game is not garbage or anything. It had a lot of potential, but yeah, because of its flaws / drawbacks, which are pretty heavy actually, yeah, there's nothing more in it for this game to be more like an average first-person shooter. And I actually have a little history with this game, so the game actually is a little bit special for me personally, and the reason for that is that this was my very first CD-ROM game that I ever bought, and I even bought this game before I actually had a CD-ROM drive for my PC back in the days. I bought it on summer vacation in the United States. I don't remember exactly the year, but I guess it was either in 94 or 95. I found it in a small computer store which sold for the most part actually programs and learning software, but they also had a few shelves with some games. And this shop was in a shopping mall in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And as soon as I saw the game, I immediately fell in love with the box art. I think this game has a very beautiful box art. I really love it. And from that moment on when I saw this game, I knew I had to buy it, even though I didn't have the CD-ROM drive at that time, but I knew at some point I'm gonna have a CD-ROM drive, and then I don't have to search for this game anymore. Especially back in the days there was no eBay or anything, so it would be, back in the days it would be a lot harder to find this game than, let's say, today. And actually my first CD-ROM drive I bought in December 1996, along with a copy of Rebel Assault. So I had this game even back then, a long time before I actually had my CD-ROM drive. And honestly, yeah, the anticipation was actually a lot bigger than the excitement that I had when I played this game the first couple of times. And honestly, I also never played this game very much because I always lost interest around the 4th level, I guess. And also another reason why, yeah, I lost more or less interest in this game was that reading wasn't my thing back in the days, especially the reading of manuals, which today is completely different, but back in the days I never really had, never really knew what I had to do in this game. So this was the reason why I never finished it back in the days. And now, almost 20 years later, just a few months ago, when I decided that I wanna make those reviews about the Terminator games from Bethesda Softworks, yeah, this was the very first game where I thought, okay, now I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna play this game, I'm gonna finish it. And I also recorded the end boss fight and also the end sequence, because there was no video on YouTube about this game, and I know that from all the people that played this game back in the days, or maybe even today, not many finished this game. So I recorded the end boss fight and everything and uploaded it to YouTube. So if you are interested, you can find the video on YouTube. And yeah, basically this is all that I have to say about this game. Yeah, would I recommend it? I would recommend it, but only to a couple of people, only to hardcore first-person shooters who really want, or for those people who really want to play almost every first-person shooter that was ever released. Then I would also recommend it to hardcore PC-DOS gamers, and of course to collectors. I don't want to recommend it to more people, since it is very special and it has really some heavy flaws, so this is the reason why I can't recommend it to every first-person shooter fan or anything. Okay, but now we're at the end of my review of the Terminator Rampage. This was the 3rd out of 5 Terminator games which were made by Bethesda Softworks for the PC-DOS. I hope you enjoyed the show, maybe see you next time, take care. And yeah, since there are two more games left to go, for me at least, for my review, I also have to say I'll be back.